right, we're back on the record after a lunch break. It's now about 1:36, and we've done the adverse examination of Miss, Christine Preston. I was going to call you something else.
Yes.
Christine Preston. And now, Mr. Mullenbach, you said you had a few questions. Go ahead.
Yes, Judge. Ms. Preston, earlier in your testimony, there seemed to be a lot of confusion as far as the procedures and processes of the investigation and the disciplinary process, particularly with respect to work rules and how those work rules flow. So I just wanted to address some of those issues. But let me just start out by stating that you had mentioned in your previous testimony that there were a number of investigations that opened immediately after the escape, correct?
Yes.
And you also testified that this was a serious investigation due to the scope of those investigations. Just the sheer number, I think, is what you said, correct?
Yes, number and nature, I would say.
Okay, so what was the scope of those investigations initially? I think I'll leave it there. What was the scope initially?
Sure. So I don't remember how many people initially were under investigation, but I know that CCI had identified several potential areas of misconduct by staff, line staff in terms of the actual morning of the escape, and then other staff in terms of leading up to the escape itself.
Right, and those investigations were referred to, referred for investigation by Warden Novak. Do I recall that correctly?
Yes.
Okay. And when did I think you had obviously you had mentioned that the scope of the investigation eventually expanded into the security director, the deputy warden, and the warden of Columbia, correct?
Correct.
And do you recall when the scope expanded into those three individuals particularly?
I don't recall the exact date, but it was the 2 weeks that we were physically on site at CCI. So the 2 weeks following the escape.
Okay. Judge, when you have a minute, could you pull up page 1? Well, it's Exhibit 12, Respondents Exhibit 12, and page 154, please.
Oh. Okay. All right. 1 second. All right, we're sharing again, and this is Respondents Exhibit 12, and this is page 152, and you said you wanted 154?
I believe so. I may have mistyped it, but I believe it's 154.
Okay. All right, that's 154.
Yep, that's the page right there. So, Ms. Preston, I know you looked at this document earlier in your testimony, but do you recognize this document?
Yes, it looks like it's the 15807 for Sue Novak.
And I'm sorry, Judge, can you scroll down just a little bit more for me, please? Okay, right there is good, Judge. And based on this document, can you tell who submitted this 15807?
Yes, it states the former DI Administrator Magda Festahaya. And
does it state the date on which the document was submitted?
It does. It states it as May 6, 2020.
Okay, so so the subject of the investigation for this 15807 is Susan Novak, correct?
Correct.
So it was almost an entire month after the escape occurred that Ms. Novak became the subject of an investigation. Is that accurate?
Sure. Yes.
And so you had testified earlier that this is the forum that initiates the investigations. Are there any work rules identified on this document?
No, there aren't.
Okay, can you explain what is identified on this document?
Yeah, so it just gives the investigator the name, the dates of the alleged incident, and a brief description of what they're to investigate. The section that we're reviewing now is just HR to talk about status. So HR inputs this, and it states that she was on leave without, or excuse me, leave with pay.
Okay, and can you scroll up just slightly, Judge, please? Right there, please, Judge. So there's a section here that's called brief description of incident. Do you see that, Ms. Preston?
I do.
And what is that? What is the purpose of that section?
Sure. So this is to let the investigators know what kind of the scope of their investigation is in relation to the subject.
And can you just briefly tell us what this description states?
Sure. So it states that following the escape, preliminary after action was conducted, and that there were security issues that were not addressed by CCI leadership, and potential policy and incident reporting guidelines were not followed following the escape.
Okay, so based on that information that is contained on this document, I believe you testified that you would then assign this investigation to one of your internal affairs investigators, correct?
That's correct.
And then just very briefly, I don't want to cover ground we've already covered, but what happens after that?
Sure. So they decide who's going to be interviewed, review evidence, and then conduct the investigation.
Okay, and you supervise that investigation. You're not involved in the investigation, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And I think you also testified that individuals that are the subject of an investigation, at least in this case, Ms. Novak, I think you also said the security director and the deputy warden, they were placed on administrative leave. I know you don't make that decision, but you indicated that you were aware of that fact.
Yes.
And that was based on this investigation or these investigations?
That's correct.
Okay. Judge, if you could scroll down, same exhibit, but if you could just scroll down to page 182 for me, please.
All right, we're on page 182 of Respondents Exhibit 12. Go ahead.
Okay, so Ms. Preston, you had testified earlier that one of the potential rule violations that were identified in the investigation involved Ms. Novak having knowledge of the stun fence being improperly installed, but she did nothing about it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, Judge, I apologize. I don't know exactly what paragraph it is, but if you could scroll down for me, please. I think it's on the next page. Okay, right there, Judge.
So we're on page 183 of Respondents Exhibit 12. Go ahead.
And that, I guess, so this is the summary of the investigation, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And the fact that Ms. Novak knew about the improperly installed stun fence is addressed on this page?
Yes, it appears to be.
Okay. And that allegation or that potential work rule violation was based on statements or admissions that Ms. Novak made during the course of this investigation, correct?
Yes, I would say so, and potentially other evidence that we had collected throughout the course of the investigation.
Okay. Judge,
Mr. Fallenbach, you're getting very much into a leading position here. I would like to hear from the witness, not from you. Go ahead.
I guess I was looking at this as a cross, but I'll...
Again, she's your witness. This is more of a clarification, so...
I can change up the tactic, Judge. If you could change to, or I'm sorry, yeah, same exhibit, page 564, please.
All right, we're on Respondents Exhibit 12, page 164. Go ahead, please.
Ms. Preston, I'd like to direct your attention to the
564, I mean.
Yeah, question and answer 132, please.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Judge. I just want to make sure I forgot to just identify whose statement this was. So let me just back up here real quick so I can do that. If you could go to page 550, Judge. I apologize. Again, that was 550.
All right, we're on 550. And
Okay.
Go ahead.
Ms. Preston, do you recognize this document?
I do. It appears to be a 15807C.
And whose interview was this?
This appears to be a witness interview of Sue Novak.
Right. Okay. And what was the interview date? When was this interview taken?
It looks like April 22nd of 2020.
And again, you had mentioned that this is a witness interview. Does that mean she wasn't a subject at this time?
That's correct.
Okay. Judge, if I could have you go back down to question and answer 132 again, please.
And what page was that?
Oh, I'm sorry. Before you move, I apologize. Who's listed as the subject in this document, Ms. Preston?
Sure. So there is no listed staff member, just due to the large scope. It was the first kind of wave of those. I don't remember how many, but I believe there were at least 10 staff members. So it's just listed as the initial CCI escape investigations.
Okay. But Ms. Novak was not a subject at this point, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Sorry, Judge. Yeah, if you could go down to question and answer 132.
Which is page?
I'm getting the page number now for you. It's page number 564, please.
I'm getting concerned that he's being called on to speculate as to why the administrator authorized the investigation.
Okay. Well, we'll see what the question is. Go ahead.
The question.
So if you could just read to yourself question and answer 132 for me, please, Ms. Preston.
Okay. Okay, I've read it.
That question and answer session was, let me explain, let me ask you, what was the question there and what was the answer? What did it pertain to?
The question was asked about if there were any concerns about the layout of the fence, and according to this, Warden Novak stated that there were.
Okay, and just to clarify, she actually specified that there were concerns about the stun fence and that it was actually on the wrong side of the fence, correct?
Yes.
Okay, now I want to jump to question and answer 133.
Page.
Same page, just the next question and answer, Judge.
All right, go ahead. So we're still on page 564. Go ahead.
Okay.
And Ms. Preston, could you just give us a brief explanation as to what that question and answer pertained to?
Sure. It appears that Warden Novak was asked if she was aware of the concerns prior to the escape, and she said that she was, and that it was installed wrong sometime in the 2000s.
Okay. Did she indicate who told her about the fence being improperly installed?
She did. She stated she thought it was Deputy Warden Lucas Weber.
Okay. And when did she indicate when Deputy Warden, or she believed Deputy Warden told her about that improperly installed stun fence?
It says when she first got here, so I'm assuming that means when she first went to Columbia Correctional Institution.
As the warden?
I would assume so, yes.
Okay, now I want to draw your attention to the very next question and answer, question 134, and the answer, please. And could you tell us what that says, please?
Sure.
So the question in 134 is, was there anything done to address those concerns? Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
And that pertains to the sun fence, of course?
Yes.
And what was Ms. Novak's answer?
Do you want me to read the answer or summarize it?
Sure, you can read it.
Okay. She said, I did not do anything. I don't remember if I mentioned it to Mr. Percy, and I don't know if initially when it happened, if there were any decisions made to leave it, or what we are getting now is the fence company said that they were told to do it that way. That's how the institution wanted it.
So when she refers to what she's being told now, that the fence company was told to do it that way, do you interpret that to mean after the escape she looked into that?
Yes.
I mean,
Okay, and sorry, Judge. So again, if we could, Judge, if we could go back to the summary of investigations, which let me make sure I know where that is. I apologize. I think it's page 182, Judge.
Okay, we're on page 182 of Response Exhibit 12, and this is the Employee Investigation Report Summary of Investigation Findings for Warden Novak. Go ahead.
Yes, and so, well, I guess I'll ask you, Ms. Preston, you agree that this is the summary of investigation findings, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Judge, could you now go down to page 184? It's just a couple of pages down, of course.
All right, we're on page 184 now.
Okay, I think I need to go a little higher. I apologize, Judge, towards the top of page 184.
This is the top of, I think, of 184. You're looking at the bottom of 183.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yep, right there. I apologize. I had the number wrong. So, and I think you went over this in your previous testimony, but one of the allegations of potential work rule violations involved the perimeter fence, and that's one of the work rule violations that's identified here, correct?
Yes.
And for purposes of that allegation, as it pertains to Ms. Novak only, does it matter when the stun fence was installed?
objection called for speculation.
Sustained. I don't know.
Well,
Could you ask for a bank of knowledge from her in terms
Sure.
of?
So you were involved in determining whether or not work rule violations were going to be recommended, correct?
Correct.
And one of the work rule violations that was ultimately recommended was that Ms. Novak received information regarding the perimeter fence or the stun fence being improperly installed when she became warden, and she did not do anything about it or didn't do anything to get the perimeter fence corrected, correct?
Correct.
So I guess I don't want to put words in your mouth, but all that matters as far as that allegation is concerned, then, is she knew that the fence was improperly installed.
Let's stop here. So when you're looking at that, was that something you actually determined? Because you said there were things that you determined and then things that other people changed. So was that even your determination?
So I don't know what was changed or if anything was changed, but reviewing the documents today, yes, I believe that the fence was part of our recommendation. Whether or not that was the exact wording, I'm not sure of, because that does get changed often.
And in your analysis of that, determining that that should be put forward as a work rule violation, did you consider that this fence had been installed improperly many, many years before she became the warden?
Yes, everything that was included in the evidence was considered. Yes.
And so why did this still occur, even though she had been previously not the warden when this all happened?
Sure. So we made a recommendation that, based on the evidence that we had and her admission that she failed to address it at all. In addition, it's not just the installation correctly. It was also many factors, including that the alarm on the fence wasn't working, that was failed to be addressed by CCI as well. So it wasn't just the installation of it.
Go ahead then.
And Ms. Preston, if previous administrations determined that they weren't going to take any action regarding this improperly installed fence, does that prohibit the current administration from not taking any action, or from taking it? Let me reword that. Previous administrations may or may not have determined to take any action based on the improperly installed fence, but does that prohibit the current administration from taking action on the improperly installed fence and doing nothing about it, or at least the knowledge of that improperly installed fence?
So objection vague. It's not clear if he's talking about the secretary's administration or something else.
Yeah, the secretaries. That's what I intended to limit it to.
Sure. Can you
So
just repeat?
why don't we just, for the record,
I can
clarify?
sorry. Yeah, I'll restate it. So the perimeter fence was improperly stalled. I think we are clear on it that it was improperly stalled prior to Miss Novak becoming the warden at Columbia Correctional Institution, correct?
Yes.
And I think are you aware of whether or not Miss Novak became the warden of Columbia Correctional prior to Secretary Carr becoming the Secretary of DOC?
I would have to verify dates, but I believe it was after he was the secretary.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure.
If other wardens knew about this improperly installed stun fence and prior secretaries did nothing about it as far as engaging in investigations or recommending investigations, would that prohibit other secretaries or the current secretary to recommend this investigation?
Objection assumes facts not in evidence. In fact, we have a security audit that contradicts that question.